Zewditu was Empress of Ethiopia from 1916 to 1930, the first female head of an internationally recognized state in Africa in the 19th and 20th centuries, and the first empress regnant of the Ethiopian Empire perhaps since the legendary Makeda, the Queen of Sheba. Her reign was noted for the reforms of her regent and designated heir Rastafari Makonnen, about which she was at best ambivalent and often stridently opposed, due to her staunch conservatism and strong religious devotion. Early life. Baptized as Askala Mayim, but using the given name Zewditu, the future empress was the eldest daughter of the then Negus Menelik of Showa, the future Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia. Zewditu is an Amharic word meaning the crown, though it sometimes appears erroneously anglicized as Judith, with which it is not cognate. Her mother, Waziri Abichi, was a noblewoman of Wollo and a brief companion of Menelik. Her mother had separated from Menelik when Zewditu was very young, and the future empress was raised by her father and his consort Bafana. Negus Menelik later married Techi Betul, but had no children by this wife. Menelik had 3 acknowledged children: Zewditu herself, a son Asforwasan who died in infancy, and another daughter Showa Rega, the mother of Elijah Iyasu, Menelik's eventual heir. However, the emperor remained closest to Zewditu, who also had good relations with her stepmother Empress Techu, and was part of her father's household for most of her life. In 1886, the 10-year-old Zewditu was married to Rasariya Selassie Yohannes, son and heir of Emperor Yohannes IV. The marriage was political, having been arranged when Menelik agreed to submit to Yohannes' rule. Yohannes and Menelik eventually fell into conflict again, however, with Menelik launching a rebellion against Yohannes' rule. Zewditu's marriage was childless, being very young during her marriage, although her husband had fathered a son by another woman. When Araya Selassie died in 1888, she left Mekelle and returned to her father's court in Shewa. Despite the hostility between Menelik and Yohannes, Zewditu managed throughout the conflicts to maintain good relations with both, in a sign of his higher regard and affection for his daughter-in-law. Emperor Yohannes IV sent Zewditu back to Shewa with a large gift of valuable cattle, at a point that relations between him and her father were at a particularly low point. Zewditu had 2 further marriages, both brief, before marrying Ras Gugzavela. Gugzavela was the nephew of Empress Techu, Zewditu's stepmother. Zewditu had already been on good terms with Techu, but the establishment of a direct tie between the two helped cement the relationship. Unlike her prior marriages, Zewditu's marriage to Gugzavela is thought to have been happy. Ascent to power. Upon the death of Emperor Yohannes IV at the Battle of Metemmeh against the Mahdists of the Sudan, Negus Menelik of Shewa assumed power and became Emperor of Ethiopia in 1889. This restored the direct male-line succession of the dynasty, as Emperor Yohannes's claim to the throne was through a female link to the line. As the daughter of Menelik II, Zewditu would be the last monarch in direct agnatic descent from the Solomonic dynasty. Her successor Haile Selassie was also linked in the female line. In 1913, Menelik died, and Elijah Iyasu, the son of Zewditu's half-sister Showa Rega, who had been publicly declared heir apparent in 1909, took the throne. Iyasu considered Zewditu a potential threat to his rule, and exiled her and her husband to the countryside. Due to fears of instability that might be caused, the cabinet of ministers decided not to publicly proclaim the death of Menelik II. As a result, Iyasu was never officially proclaimed as Emperor Iyasu V. However, both Menelik's death and Iyasu's de facto accession were widely known and accepted. The church authorities, the Lord Regent Ras Tessima, and the ministers agreed that Iyasu's coronation should be postponed until he was a bit older and had taken Holy Communion with his wife, making his marriage insoluble in the eyes of the Orthodox Church. However, Iyasu quickly encountered problems with his rule and he was never crowned. He was widely disliked by the nobility for his unstable behavior, and the church held him in suspicion for his alleged Muslim sympathies. After a troubled few years, Ieyasu was removed from power. Zewditu was summoned to the capital, and on 27 September 1916, the Council of State and the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church officially announced the death of Emperor Menelik II and deposed Ieyasu in favor of Zewditu. Zewditu's official title was Queen of Kings, a modification of the traditional title, King of Kings. Initially, Zewditu was not permitted to exercise power herself. Instead, her cousin Rastafari Makonnen was appointed regent, and her father's old loyal general, Fitoreri Hapta-Giorgis Dinagda, was made commander-in-chief of the army. Rastafari was also made heir apparent to Zewditu. None of Zewditu's children had survived to adulthood. In 1928, after an attempt to remove Rastafari Makonnen from power failed, the empress was compelled to crown her cousin Negus. Reign. Political maneuvering. While the conservative Ethiopian aristocracy was generally supportive of Zewditu, it was less enthusiastic about many of her relatives. Zewditu's stepmother and the aunt of her husband, Dowager Empress Techi Betul, had withdrawn from the capital after Menelik's death, but was still distrusted somewhat due to the evident favorism she had practiced during the reign of her late husband. In an attempt to limit her influence, the aristocracy arranged for her nephew to be appointed to a remote governorship, removing him from court. This move, while intended as a strike against Techi rather than against Zewditu, is believed to have upset Zewditu considerably. Zewditu also suffered guilt for taking the throne from Ieyasu, who her father had wanted to succeed him. While she believed that Ieyasu's overthrow was necessary, she had admired her father greatly, and was unhappy at having to disobey his wishes. Her separation from her husband and her guilt about Ieyasu's overthrow combined to make Zewditu not particularly happy as empress. Interestingly, even though he had treated her abominably, she held much personal affection for her nephew Ieyasu, and is said to have wept bitterly for him when told that she was being made empress, as her nephew had been excommunicated for apostasy. Increasingly, the empress retreated from state responsibility into a world of fasting and prayer. As the progressive elements that surrounded the heir, Tafari Makonnen, gained in strength and influence at court. War against Ieyasu. The early period of Zewditu's reign was marked by a war against Elijah Ieyasu, who had escaped captivity. Backed by his father, Negus Mikhael of Wollo, a powerful northern leader, Ieyasu attempted to regain the throne. The two failed to effectively coordinate their efforts, however, and after some initial victories, Ieyasu's father was defeated and captured at the Battle of Sagale. The Negus was paraded through the streets of Addis Ababa in chains, carrying a rock of repentance on his shoulders, before entering the throne room and kissing the empress's shoes to beg for her mercy. The heir to the throne, Rastafari Makonnen, was not present at this spectacle out of consideration for the feelings of his wife, who was the granddaughter of Negus Mikhael. Upon hearing of his father's defeat and humiliation, Ieyasu himself fled to afar. After years on the run, Ieyasu was later captured by Dejazmish Gugzaraya Selassie, the son who Zewditu's first husband had fathered by another woman. Gugzaraya was rewarded with the title of Ras from his former stepmother, and Princess Yeshashwerki Ilma, the niece of Tafari Makonnen, as his bride. When Ieyasu was captured, a tearful Empress Zewditu pleaded that he be kept in a special house on the grounds of the palace where she would see to his care and he could receive religious counsel. She found Rastafari and Fitoreri Hapta-Giorgis to be unbendingly opposed, and so gave up. She did, however, make sure that special favorite foods and a constant supply of clothing and small luxuries reached Elijah Ieyasu at his place of arrest in Selale. Rise of Tafari. As Empress Zewditu's reign progressed, the difference in outlook gradually widened between her and her appointed heir, Rastafari Makonnen. Tafari was a modernizer, believing that Ethiopia needed to open itself to the world in order to survive. In this, he had the backing of many younger nobles. Zewditu, however, was a conservative, believing in the preservation of Ethiopian tradition. She had the strong backing of the church in this belief. Slowly, however, Zewditu began to withdraw from active politics, leaving more and more power to Tafari. Under Tafari's direction, Ethiopia entered the League of Nations, and abolished slavery. Zewditu busied herself with religious activities, such as the construction of a number of significant churches. In 1928, there was a small conservative uprising against Tafari's reforms, but it was unsuccessful. Empress Zewditu was compelled to grant Tafari, who now controlled most of the Ethiopian government, the title of king. While Negus Tafari remained under the nominal rule of Zewditu, Tafari was now effectively the ruler of Ethiopia. A number of attempts were made to displace him, but they were all unsuccessful. In 1930, Zewditu's husband Ras Gugzavela led a rebellion against Negus Tafari in Begemder, hoping to end the regency in spite of his wife's repeated pleas and orders to desist, but was defeated and killed in battle by the modernized Ethiopian army at the Battle of Anchem on 31 March 1930. Death and succession. On 2 April 1930, 2 days after Ras Gugzavela was killed in battle, Empress Zewditu died. It is known today that Zewditu suffered from diabetes, and was seriously ill with typhoid, but it is not universally agreed that this was the cause of her death. According to some popular histories, Zewditu died of shock and grief at hearing of her husband's death, but other accounts contradict this, claiming that Zewditu was not informed of the battle's outcome before her sudden death. Some diplomatic sources in Addis Ababa reported at the time that the fever-stricken empress was immersed in a large container of frigidly cold holy water to cure her of her illness, but that her body went into shock and she died shortly thereafter. The timing of her death immediately after news of the outcome of the battle reached Addis Ababa has caused considerable speculation as to her cause of death. Some, particularly conservative critics of her successor, Emperor Haile Selassie, allege that once the rebellion had been decisively defeated, he or his supporters felt safe in poisoning Zewditu. Speculation as to the cause of Zewditu's death continues today. Empress Zewditu was succeeded on the throne by Negus Tafari, who took the name of Emperor Haile Selassie. Family tree.